The soldier hears a click beneath his boot. He freezes. He knows what it means. He has exactly 3 seconds to decide. Step off and trigger the explosion, or stand perfectly still and wait for help that might never come. Welcome to the most psychological warfare ever designed, where every step, every door, every abandoned weapon could be your last. Some visuals in this video are AI generated or recreated for educational and illustrative purposes to help explain historical events. World War II wasn't just fought with tanks and aircraft. It was fought with deception, terror, and traps so ingenious, so utterly cruel, that they turned ordinary objects into instruments of death. These weren't weapons of honor. They were weapons of fear. The concept wasn't new. Traps had been used in warfare for centuries, but World War II took it to an industrial scale. Every nation involved developed increasingly sadistic methods to maim, kill, and psychologically destroy their enemies. And here's the darkest part. Many of these traps weren't designed to kill quickly. They were designed to wound, to create screaming casualties that would demoralize entire units and drain medical resources. The engineers who designed these devices weren't thinking about battles. They were thinking about nightmares. Let's start with the most infamous, the landmine. But not the landmines you're imagining. We're talking about devices so sensitive that a butterfly landing on them could trigger detonation. The German mine, nicknamed Bouncing Betty by Allied soldiers, was perhaps the most feared. Here's how it worked. You step on it. A small charge fires, launching the mine 3 feet into the air. Then it detonates at waist height, spraying 360 degrees of shrapnel designed to shred everything within 60 feet. The engineers calculated the exact height for maximum casualties. Not to kill, to castrate, to eviscerate, to ensure that even survivors would never be whole again. But the Bouncing Betty had a darker feature, a secondary trigger. Even if you spotted it, even if you carefully tried to disarm it, the slightest disturbance could set it off. Bomb disposal experts would spend hours sweating over a single mine, knowing one wrong move would be their last. The Japanese took trap warfare to even more psychological extremes in the Pacific Theater. On islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa, they didn't just plant traps, they designed entire landscapes of death. Spider holes. Tiny, camouflaged fighting positions where a soldier could hide completely underground, invisible to advancing troops. American Marines would clear an area, declare it secure, then get shot in the back by enemies emerging from holes they'd walked over a dozen times. The paranoia was unbearable. Every square foot of jungle could be hiding someone waiting to kill you. But that was just the beginning. The Japanese would booby-trap their own dead. A Marine would see a fallen enemy soldier and cautiously approach to check for intelligence. The moment he touched the body, a grenade hidden underneath would detonate. They booby-trapped helmets, rifles, even flags. Anything a soldier might naturally want to examine or collect as a souvenir became a potential death sentence. And then there were the caves. The Japanese would retreat into cave systems, but before they did, they'd rig the entrances with traps, tripwires connected to grenades, logs suspended overhead, ready to crush anyone who entered. False floors covering pits filled with sharpened bamboo spikes, punji sticks coated with human waste to ensure infection if the fall didn't kill you. Allied flamethrower operators became priority targets because they were the only effective way to clear these positions. But the Japanese knew this. They'd create fake cave entrances, empty holes designed to draw in flamethrower teams, only to have snipers pick them off from actual hidden positions. Every door was a gamble. Every abandoned bunker could be your tomb. The Eastern Front was where trap warfare reached its most brutal efficiency. The Soviets and Germans engaged in a deadly competition of innovation, each side trying to out-engineer the other's cruelty. When the Germans retreated from Soviet territory, they left behind a nightmare. They booby-trapped everything. Pianos rigged to explode when a key was pressed. Stoves that detonated when lit. Toilets connected to explosives. They weren't trying to kill soldiers, they were trying to kill civilians to make returning to normal life impossible. In Stalingrad, both sides turned the rubble itself into weapons. A seemingly stable pile of debris would be carefully arranged to collapse when disturbed, burying soldiers alive. Staircases in bombed buildings would have steps removed and covered with cloth, so soldiers rushing upward in darkness would plunge through into the basement. But the most psychologically devastating trap was simpler: the pressure release mine. Unlike a normal mine that explodes when you step on it, this one explodes when you step off it. Imagine realizing you've triggered a device, but as long as you maintain pressure, you're alive. The moment you move, the moment your strength gives out, you die. German engineers designed these specifically to create horrific dilemmas. A soldier would freeze in place, calling for help. His squad would have to decide: risk their lives trying to disarm it, or leave him to his fate. Sometimes they'd try to weigh down the mine while he slowly removed his foot. Sometimes they'd just wait until exhaustion took over and the inevitable happened. The psychological toll was immeasurable. Entire units would become paralyzed by fear, moving at a crawl, checking every footstep, never knowing what was real and what was rigged. The war ended in 1945, but the traps didn't. Millions of landmines and unexploded booby traps remained buried across Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. They're still there. Even today, 80 years later, farmers in France plow up live ordnance from World War I and II. Children playing Informer. War zones still trigger devices their great-grandparents planted. In Southeast Asia, Japanese holdouts who didn't know the war had ended continued to maintain their traps for years. Some caves in the Philippines weren't fully cleared until the 1970s, 30 years after the fighting stopped. But here's the truly disturbing legacy. These World War II traps became the blueprint for modern insurgent warfare. The Viet Cong studied Japanese tactics and improved them. The booby traps used in Vietnam, the punji pits, the tripwired grenades, the psychological terror of never knowing what was safe came directly from World War II innovations. Today, IEDs in Iraq and Afghanistan are the direct descendants of the Bouncing Betty and German pressure mines. The technology has changed, but the psychology is identical. Turn the environment itself into a weapon, make every step a potential death sentence, and destroy the enemy's will to advance. But here's what the history books often gloss over. The men who designed these traps were celebrated engineers. They received commendations, promotions, and patents. After the war, many went on to successful careers in civilian industries, using the same creative problem-solving skills they'd applied to killing. The engineer who perfected the Bouncing Betty's detonation height worked for a German industrial company after the war. The designers of Japanese cave traps became construction consultants. Their expertise in structural engineering, learned through creating death traps, was considered valuable, not criminal, and the soldiers who survived these traps. Many never spoke about them. The psychological scars were too deep. There is a particular kind of trauma that comes from knowing the ground beneath you might explode at any moment. It's not the same as combat. It's a constant, gnawing anxiety that never fully goes away. Veterans would return home and find themselves unable to walk on grass, unable to enter rooms without checking door frames, unable to trust any object they didn't personally place there. Their families couldn't understand why a simple walk through a park would trigger panic attacks. How do you explain that? For years, one wrong step meant death. The most horrible traps of World War II weren't just mechanical devices. They were psychological weapons that turned the entire world into a potential threat. They transformed ordinary actions, walking, opening doors, picking up objects, into potentially fatal decisions. The engineers who designed them understood something dark about human nature. The fear of the unknown is more powerful than direct combat. A soldier can face an enemy shooting at him. But walking through a field, knowing every step could be your last, that breaks something fundamental in the human psyche. These traps killed tens of thousands during the war. But they wounded millions psychologically, soldiers and civilians alike, who learned that nowhere was safe. Nothing could be trusted, and death could be hiding in the most innocent objects. Today, unexploded ordnance from World War II still kills and maims. Every year, people die from devices planted generations before they were born. The war ended 80 years ago. But some traps never stop killing, and the psychological scars they created, those don't have a half-life. They're still exploding in the minds of survivors, waiting for the weight of memory to finally trigger the release.